question.
It's about
has that political capital. And there's so much noise. I even see friends of mine on civil side saying, we still have an illegitimate election. What's their basis? I really don't know. Some technology expert, I would not mention them because they're personal friends of mine. Or are they carrying certain political interest? No? But when I look at data, again, I'm a political scientist by training, so I rely on data. No? There were even 39% of people were saying there was less cheating. But what I took note of is the credibility of elections, 67 plus 18. Or the speed of counting votes in Comelec was 86%. That's technology. And in Strat-based, we're proud of how technology can help governance. Even before the Marcos Jr. administration, we've been advocating, and my colleague Orly is somewhere here. He's there. He is our lead in our digital transformation initiatives. Working with technology experts outside the country, working with companies involved in technology in our country, and how technology can make our people more transparent, live in a world which is more transparent and accountable. And in one of our side questions also, next slide please, is there a presence of cheating? No? We see it, and when we talk to people, it's about vote buying, not really the legitimacy of election. But in my next slide, we see improvements according to the public with regards to the speed of counting. And it's not only the Philippines. Something that I tracked when I was still teaching governance at the De La Salle University, something that I asked my students to read is the Freedom House report. It was on a decline previous year. But in 2023, they came out with, and I wanted to share this quote. Next, please. The 2022 Philippine elections primarily demonstrated democratic continuity, pluralism, and competitive elections, and reversed the downward trend. Particular to the present administration, its pronouncement and programs on inclusive recovery and growth provide tender to a democratic platform. While a son of a former dictator won the presidency, the competitive campaign had the effect of mobilizing millions of young voters. I used to say in my own words, democracy, we will outlive people who would like to tamper with Philippine democracy because it's ingrained in Philippine society. I've seen that elections after elections. Not perfect, but it's there. No? But as we shift to an important, elections are over, we have a president for a year already, we're tracking his performance rating, and I think it will be out by July, and we have tracked it the past 3 quarters. It's within the range of 76 to 80%. That means 58% voted for the president, but as we moved on, even those who did not vote for him accepts his performance, trust his performance as president. So now the challenge is, can we pursue accountability more? And when we saw this news, and we were looking forward to this news of an executive order signed by the president just last June 20, 2023, of a Philippine Open Government Partnership. I remember our colleague, Dr. Kiko, who opened their eyes to this existence, I think the past 4 administrations. But the real hero is here, actually, ASEC. ASEC Rolly is here. He's been in the forefront of that. You cannot imagine that there are people inside their government advocating this, even during, some would say, dark times at times, but we have people. So we're happy to bring people together here. And when the president issued a statement, of course, this is a long dream of everyone, the FOI, but maybe through technology, maybe that's a solution. So looking forward, but can this happen? Or we need to make it happen? Or we should make this happen collectively? Because at the end of the day, I've said, I was just doing an analysis of latest foreign direct investments across regions with my colleague. We have an economic research department. Top concern for FDIs is still governance. Governance. And investment creates those initiatives that will help our people uplift our lives. We're proud of the 7% growth driven by consumption. But can you imagine if you get consumption side by side with investment-led growth? Then you uplift the lives of our people. That's why here in StratBase, we push for these things. Just today, we published, it will be out in our online platform, what I call governance in the first year of the Marcos Jr. administration, where I spoke of reinforcing link and variable in achieving a resilient, inclusive, and prosperous Philippine society pertains to that dynamic relationship between government as the enabler, the private sector as the indispensable actor, the civil society as the guardian of societal process, and the commerce of relations. In essence, what is taking form in the first year of the Marcos Jr. administration is collaborative and inclusive governance. Imagine setting up the Private Sector Advisory Council. People got surprised by that. No? Even private sectors were telling me, is this for real? Will this happen? And it seems to be moving. No? This is in tune with the demands of challenging times and the resulting political opportunities offered by multidimensional and geopolitical concerns. Even in the way we deal with our security challenges, we are building partnerships and alliances beyond traditional. And so for some of you, you know me as more of an analyst in the defense and security space. But what I always say is that we should not be caught in the China-US strategic rivalry. We should only be focused on Philippine national interests. And Philippine national interest means building alliances and partnership with countries that share our values of a rules-based international order. So even in that space, we need partnership. We need collaboration. We need inclusiveness. So I would like to emphasize what reverberates among the challenges and opportunities posed by the situation and government programs in the domains of energy, trade, investments, environment, and climate change, and even the geopolitical situation in the West Philippine Sea, is the critical role of strategic collaboration between and among stakeholders. That's what we have today in this room. That's what we want to help build with government, with the academe, with the private sector, with the corporate sector, with the international community. And hopefully you can join us in this advocacy. Build this coalition that will ensure a more transparent and accountable Philippine governance that will generate jobs and create a consumption and investment-led growth for the Filipino people. Thank you for this opportunity. I pass it on now to Joyce.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit. Can't believe it's been a year since June 30, 2022. Time flies so fast talaga, no? All right, so before we proceed to the next speaker, we would like to remind everyone, should you have any question that you want to ask our speakers, we will allow you to ask them later during the open forum. If you're feeling a little shy, you can also write them on the sheets of paper you have on the table, and you can hand them over to our organizers there on the sides and at the back. And to those who are watching us live on Zoom, you can also put your questions or input the questions in the Q&A box in the lower part of your screen. All right, so our next speaker will talk about ensuring transparency and accountability through budget modernization. He is Assistant Secretary Rolando Toledo of the Department of Budget and Management. As Assistant Secretary, he assists in the supervision of the Local Government and Regional Coordination Bureau and the department's regional offices in ensuring that budget and management policies are consistently implemented in the DBM regional offices. He is also currently supervising the operations of the Philippine Open Government Partnership, which was mentioned earlier by Sir Dindo, and the Participatory Governance Cluster of the Cabinet and its secretariats in promoting fiscal transparency and participatory governance of the administration. So ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome ASEC Rolando Toledo.
All right, so thank you very much, Joyce, for that generous introduction. So good morning to everyone. Yes, yes, I'm Assistant Secretary Toledo, and I'm pleased to be here with you to present to you what we have so far doing as far as the government is concerned, not just only for the Department of Budget and Management, but as a whole national government. So yes, as mentioned by Joyce, we are pleased to present to you what DBM is doing, ensuring transparent, accountable governance through budget modernization. Okay, now my agenda for this morning is to present to you basically starting with the what is the agenda for prosperity and its place, vital role in shaping the digital governance of this administration. Okay, this will be followed by key reforms as to transformation of transparency and accountability, and of course, the open government. Okay. May I start this by quoting my secretary in her speech given at the public forum on the Open Budget Survey 2021 last December 2022. I quote, "In all previous budget engagements, in all the reforms that DBM has initiated, and all fiscal policies formulated, we have always underscored the importance of having an open budget system, one that is transparent, fosters public participation, and has adequate budget oversight from the legislature and the audit institution." So true enough, the DBM is committed to ensure this transparency and accountability initiative, and it's in the heart of our system. Okay, now the administration agenda for prosperity, of course, will continue to prioritize programs and projects outlined in the 8-point socio-economic agenda under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s leadership, and will cater to the objectives of the Philippine Development Plan. Okay, so here under this one budget, under the national, the GAA 2023, digital transformation was established as one of the key government reform initiatives that translate to more efficient public service delivery. So, meaning to say that our transactions will be more transparent, credible, and of course, a clean governance. It will also help government build robust data system that will create a better program such as targeted social programs and more efficient employment opportunity. Now, because of developing and strengthening of our ICT, okay, infrastructure, so ICT infrastructure is imperative. So we have allocated a total of 24.13 billion pesos for ICT-related expenditure this year. So this will cover funding for free public internet access program, national government data center infrastructure, and national broadband plan, and national government portal, among others. Also, under this budget, some 3.56 billion is invested for free public internet access, okay, national government data center infrastructure, and national broadband plan. Okay. Also, that is part of that is also a support to the Department of Finance and its attached agency, Bureau of Internal Revenue and Bureau of Customs, to improve governance as far as revenue collection is concerned. Okay. Also amounting to 2.063 billion is invested to our Philippine Identification System, or PhilSys, which will afford Filipino faster delivery of social welfare benefits. And 7.24 billion also is allocated for the assistance to LGUs. So those are some of the ICT expenditures in this 2023 budget. Now, to strengthen public financial management, the DBM is committed to employ what we call the digital transformation towards agenda for prosperity, wherein we are taking a lot of digitization processes. To the next slide, we'll just recently Executive Order number 29. Magkasunod po yan, 29 and 31. I just don't know why, but it's at 30. That is that was also signed in June, but June 1, 2023, on the strengthening the integrated public financial management information system. So what will this EO, or this strengthening of IFMIS, if we call it, this will enable, of course, our greater financial management control and oversight and government agencies. Also, ensure strict compliance with existing appropriation laws, rules, and regulations, as well as government accounting standards. It also will improve the Treasury cash management system and facilitate the generation of financial reports and ease of reporting requirements from various levels of government. Now, in line with this, administration's campaign towards optimizing the digital governance and increasing bureaucratic efficiency, the establishment of this Integrated Financial Management Information System, or IFMIS, will allow us this real-time online accounting, monitoring, and control of obligations and disbursement, and directly link this to cash management for a more effective financial control and accountability. And with this IFMIS, so at a click of a finger, we can also now advise our managers or our principals on what decision to make in terms of fiscal management. Okay. Another one is the budget and treasury management system. Okay. This is an integrated web-based information management system which seeks to facilitate efficient collection and organization of financial transactions through centralized database. Okay, that will allow real-time, transparent, and information and provide governance officials that ability to make more informed decisions just the same. Okay. Also, last December 7, 2023, the DBM, together with the representatives from the Land Bank of the Philippines, the Philippine Veterans Bank, the Development Bank of the Philippines, and Anti-Red Tape Authority, and the Bureau of the Treasury signed Memorandum of Agreement for the implementation of the online release of the Notice of Cash Allocation, or NCA, through this ADR, or what we call the Action Document Release System. This partnership is aimed to eliminate unnecessary steps in printing, physical signing, routing, and releasing of printed action documents to the bank's licensed officers. So meaning releasing these documents in digital format may seem like a small step, but of course, it is crucial in the digitization initiative. It will not only improve ease of doing business, but also will facilitate and have that work to have more efficient work with the reduced cost of security paper, printing materials or supplies, and transportation expense for those licensed officer coming to the DBM to receive that NCA and notice of NCA. Okay. Another initiative that we've been implementing for this 2023 is what we call the Digital Request for Support to Local Government Support Fund. Okay, this was issued through our DBM Local Budget Circular 150 dated March 2023. So basically, this is the submission of requests of financial assistance coming from the local government agencies or local government offices or LG units to coming from the local government support fund or financial assistance to local governments, which will be made only through digital submission. So wala nang maiwasan na po natin yung third party or person to person na magsasubmit ng budget sa DBM. So it's only 2 Gs. Kasi that is also one way of eliminating what we call, as mentioned kanina, how to fight corruption. That is one also. Kasi marami, even from, that is also to protect the DBM. Kasi there are a lot of naglalayas na they are also, they say that they are official of the DBM. There are many representations going around the Philippines that they will facilitate the release of these requests. Okay. That is to also minimize or to fight corruption. All right. That is, as one of the ways to fight corruption is technology help governance to be more transparent and accountable. That is why I'm taking note from the earlier message from Professor Dindo Manhit. Okay. Now, moving on. Also, together with the Department of Information and Communication Technology, or the DICT, also the DBM signed a memorandum of understanding last June 14, 2023 in a bid to harmonize, coordinate, of course, and integrate information technology efforts to pave the way for e-governance. We understand a lot of ICT projects and programs of the different departments are not, in a way, connected. They're just use it in silos. Kumbaga, kanya-kanya. So, hindi nag-uusap yung sistema natin. So, that's one thing that we have right now. So, the MU covers collaborative efforts between the DBM and the ICT to ensure interoperability application. That is very important. Okay. Now, as far as DBM is concerned, monitoring high value, okay, project has been a challenge, really challenge for all of us, for us. So you must know that a big chunk of our national budget is appropriated yearly to our infrastructure program. That's around 5 to 5.6% of our GDP, and that's so huge. There's a big amount of infrastructure for roads, bridges, school buildings, health facilities. And having said that, it is essential to ensure that allotted budget for these programs and projects are supposed to be implemented by Filipinos at the same time na ma-monitor natin yan. And that is why, in line with the Secretary's Pangandaman's effort towards digital transformation, the project time or digital information for monitoring and evaluation, okay, will be part of its digital innovation projects, which will use extinct technologies such as what? Satellites, drones, geotagging in monitoring the status of these infrastructure projects. So Project Time will also be enrolled in our what we call the National Action Plan in the Open Government Partnership. And of course, the next slide will show us this what we call the Progressive Budgeting for Better and Modernized Government Bill. This is known previously as the Budget Modernization Bill. So the PBBM Governance Bill was identified the President as one of the priority legislative measure in his State of the Nation address, and subsequently included under the LEDAC, or the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council, as the priority legislative bill. So this is a landmark legislative measure that seeks to institutionalize accountability and integrity in the use of public resources, by ensuring transparency, fiscal responsibility, results orientation, efficiency, and effectiveness, and even citizens' participation in the budget process. Okay. This bill shall apply to the management of revenue, expenditure, financing arrangement, and asset and liabilities of national government agencies, government-owned and controlled corporations, GOCCs, and the local government units. So, kasama po yun. So, this is, that is also one way of our institutionalizing the reforms that we have already implemented and being done as of now. Okay? But, of course, we can say that we still have a challenge in the public financial management system. So that's why there's a need for us to modernize. Okay? And we say modernize is just because of this reason that we want to achieve. Because there's still a lack of comprehensive legal framework on public financial management. There's also a fragmented financial management system in the country. Efforts to establish public participation in the budget process are not consistently implemented over time. And agencies' absorptive capacity is still a challenge that are being constrained by the implementation of overlapping budgets at the same time. Okay, by the way, this what we call absorptive capacity, that is what we are using right now, even in reviewing the budget annually. What we are factoring in what we call the BUR, the budget utilization ratio of the different departments and agencies. And of course, there's a lot of unfunded loss that test the reasonable balance between revenue generation and the appropriations of expenditure. We monitor this unfunded loss even in the how many years in the past, and we've tallied this one as around 357 billion more as being not unfunded. Why? It's not because it's not considered where are the sources of revenue to support these programs or bills or laws. Okay. Now, given these challenges, we propose to enact the PBBM governance bill, which will serve as the foundation of framework, okay, to modernize the Philippine public financial management that is targeted to, next slide, to strengthen government accountability for people, okay, embed mechanism to boost fiscal sustainability, introduce digital transformation and PFM or public financial management system, strengthen Congress' power of the purse, and empower the people through an open government. And one of the reforms already that we are implementing and we want to institutionalize through this PBBM is the adoption of cash-based management system that promotes faster implementation of government programs, activities, and projects by ensuring that funding requirements for the priority PAPs are sufficient, maximized, and delivered on time. Meaning to say that the projects you are going to propose should be ready for implementation because of this cash budgeting system. So that is always we emphasize to our different departments and to the different departments and agencies. Actually, we've been implementing this since 2019 through the issuance of the Executive Order number 91, 2019, and it's still being implemented up to now. And that is also one thing that we want to institutionalize, having this PBBM. Okay. Another remarkable win, as mentioned earlier, is the issuance of Executive Order number 31, or the institutionalization of the OGP in the Philippines as a vital platform for introducing governance reform, of course, through harnessing technology, creating synergy among CSOs, and mainstreaming this innovation in various levels of government. Because, as mentioned by Professor Manhid, I take note that also one way of fight to corruption is we have to be working together, as also found, or rather based on the Pulse Asia survey, And of course, the multi-stakeholders approach is very important. Okay, so we acknowledge that and thank you. By the way, we have here, of course, Dr. Kiko, one of member of the steering committee who spearheaded this also as member of the steering committee of the Philippine Open Government Partnership. So we have this now, the sign EO to institutionalize these PHOGP. So, under this EO, the PHOGP through its steering committee shall ensure open government values are embedded in government policies and program. By the way po, member po ng steering committee is a 50-50 coming from the national government and with the civil society organization. And one good thing here as far as this EO is concerned, we have increased the number of the steering committee so that we can accommodate more CSOs to participate in this platform. So from 8, now naging 10 na po siya. Okay. Now, as a backgrounder lang for this OGP is an international platform that promotes transparency, accountability, and citizens' participation in government. So OGP was formally launched on September 2011 when the 8 founding governments, which is Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, Norway, and the Philippines, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and 9 civil society organizations endorsed the Open Government Declaration and announced their action plans. So, guided by these principles, the Philippines has remained steadfast to its commitment, of course, in energizing civic spaces. Okay. So, testament to the OGP success is in the Philippines, it was recognized as ito po, is a key mechanism in keeping the participatory governance class under Chapter 14 of the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028, entitled Practice Good Governance and Improve Bureaucratic Efficiency. It was also one of the interagency bodies that identified to steer the implementation of the strategies of the said chapter. Okay. Now, the PHOGP paved the way to be a more collaborative approach in co-creating this co-implementing programs and projects. So one is the Freedom of Information Program, Ease of Doing Business, Seal of Good Local Governance, Citizens Participatory Audit, Grassroots Participatory Budgeting, Fiscal Openness Program, and of course the Daguao Regional Town Hall Sessions. So nagagawa is already there through this OGP we have established that one. Now, moving forward, the PHOGP will be starting, of course, our co-creation process of the 6th National Action Plan. So we will be having our workshop together with the CSOs from August to September across various regions in the country. So this public consultation aims to further scrutinize the draft commitment of participating agencies to ensure that the programs and projects are under the next country action plan that have undergone discussions with non-government sector, academe, public sector unions, civil society organizations, business groups, and cooperatives, and other citizens groups. Okay. So, yun po yung gagawin po namin. So, right now, the working group, which I manage, is looking forward to partner with you, the civil society organizations, going across the country to have this consultation workshops. And it's good to know that there's a lot of agencies now submitting their commitments, and we are excited that this time the Supreme Court already interested or manifested, and even actually we have our meeting yesterday, they will submit of their commitment. So for those who are interested in the justice system, you expect that the Supreme Court will be part of this National Action Plan. Okay. Now, to support this government's initiative, we have also created, as far as DIM is concerned, given there's a lot of things that we have to do. We have created this fiscal openness working group that is to support the governance policy to increase budget transparency and to open more avenues for citizens to participate in the budget process. Okay. So part of this fiscal openness working group is tasked to develop the department's fiscal openness policy and action plan. Okay. So this action plan shall cover, of course, to the OBS, or the Open Budget Survey indicators, and will outline initiatives and strategies to harness budget transparency and public participation in the national budget process. So here, we aim to use the Open Budget Survey standards to accelerate our transparency and participation initiatives and program. Just to let you know, and thank you for Doc Kiko for he's the one assigned to assess how open the budget is. Okay. So in the recent result, okay, of the Open Budget Index in 2021, we made a sufficient strides in terms of fiscal transparency, as seen in our score in the latest round, which has positioned us as a leader in the budget transparency across Southeast Asia, which is 19 out of 120 participating countries around the world. So here, our consistent performance beyond the adequate level can be attributed to the strategy of identifying the Open Budget Index as one of the country's institutional reform agenda included in the Philippine Development Plan. So probably you will be asking from 2019 to 2021, medyo nag-sleep siya. It is because very strict po. When you not publish the documents on time, you have, of course, that will no longer consider even how your reports are sufficient to provide you with information. Okay. So we were also able to improve our score in this domain by carefully reviewing the actions in the indicators of the Open Budget Survey. Yes. So that is where we are now, and we hope that we can go back to the score that we have achieved in 2019. Okay. We're just awaiting right now the letter coming from the IBP. Okay. So moving on, this will be my last slide. Okay. Since 2012, the Transparency Seal has been an integral part of the accountability mechanism in government agencies through public disclosure of information in their websites. As such, provision in the annual national budget, nasa general provision po ng ating GAA or General Appropriations Act, wherein this transparency seal will actually should be the agencies has to post the following, in, among others, in their website. One is the approved budgets and corresponding targets immediately upon approval of the GAA, modification made of those of that amount or GAA, and then of course the annual procurement plans and contracts awarded with the mating supplier and contractor and or consultant, major PAPs and their target beneficiaries, status of implementation and evaluation of programs and projects, and the budget and financial accountability reports. And even update People's Freedom Information Manual signed by agency, head of agency, okay, and the annual report and status of income authorized by law to be retained or used in the deposited be deposited outside the National Treasury. So here, as far as the national government agency or as far as the DBM is concerned, we really advocate this transparency and accountability, not just in the DBM's purview, but also for the whole of national government. So I end from there. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone again.
Thank you very much, ASEC Toledo, for that very insightful presentation. It's very interesting to know about these programs being conducted by the Department of Budget and Management. I'm particularly curious, sir, about the DIME project, which allows the public to monitor in real time, right, sir? The status of infrastructure projects by the government. I'm sure friends from the media, CSOs, watchdogs would be particularly interested in that. Because as you said, we need to work together. While the government is doing their job, we also have to do our part to also be vigilant and monitor how the taxpayers' money are being used by the government. So again, thank you very much, ASEC Toledo. So our next speaker, as I think briefly introduced na rin by ASEC earlier, will talk about the open government as a catalyst for transparency. He is Dr. Francisco Kiko Magno, a trustee and convener of the Strat-based ADR Institute and the senior fellow and the founding director of the De La Salle Institute of Governance. He is a full professor of political science, former chairperson of the Political Science Department, and a former director of the Social Development Research Center at the De La Salle University in Manila. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Kiko Magno.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for that kind introduction. I would like to greet my fellow panel speakers, ASEC Rolly Toledo and Dean Lisan Kalina of the Development Academy of the Philippines, Dean Randy Tuanyo from the Ateneo School of Government. So my presentation this morning is on open government as a catalyst for transparency. So I would like to provide you with insights from what I would say learning experiences, having participated in this process, the Open Government Partnership. But much earlier, I was also a member of the Transparency and Accountability Network, which is a network of civil society organizations that also engage the government, especially under the administration of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. So in a way, I would say that this is part of the process. So let me tell you a bit about the concept of open government. So we view open government, and another term is open governance, as part of a supply side and a demand side process. So with open government, you have government supplying enabling conditions, enabling policies, while on the side of the citizenry, that's why we have civil society, we have public oversight, that's the demand side. A while ago, Professor Dean Dumanhit mentioned the Pulse Asia survey. So what are the aspirations of citizens? What do citizens want? And therefore, they provide inputs, and they also participate in the process. So open government maintains that citizens have the right to access the documents and proceedings of the governments to allow for effective public oversight. So you have open government, transparent government, but you also have public monitoring, public oversight. So that's why I made a reference to both the demand side, that's the public, the citizens, and the supply side, that's the government. What's the purpose of open government? It's really to provide a way by which mechanisms can be made available to improve the quality of governance and services by becoming more transparent, more accountable, and more responsive to the public. Next slide. Okay, I thought all along that I can control, but in terms of public participation, mechanisms of direct participation are not a strict alternative to political representation or expertise, but instead complement them. Here I'm quoting from Professor Arkun Fung. He teaches at the Harvard School of Government. And this is a very good article, Varieties of Participation in Complex Governance, that came out in the Public Administration Review. So he argued that public participation at its best operates in synergy with representation and administration to yield more desirable practices and outcomes of collective decision making and action. As we will look at the documents of the Open Government Partnership, there is much use of the concept of co-creation. In the scholarly literature, there is a term called co-production. So civil society is not replacing government. So in fact, what's happening is that civil society is engaged in synergy with the process of open government, open governance, and collaborative governance. Next slide. My presentation this morning is really assessing the impact of the issuance of Executive Order Number 31, which is institutionalizing the Philippine Open Government Partnership, or the PHOGP. I think this is very relevant and very impactful, considering that the OGP, or the Philippines, is a founding member of the Open Government Partnership in 2011, as discussed by ASEC Rolly Toledo, the history of OGP. And it is under this administration that we are institutionalizing the PH Open Government Partnership. So we have gone through 3 presidents. The nice thing is that this program has not been removed. This platform has continued on through 3 presidents, and ASEC Rolly Toledo has been a very important part of that process. But what is significant about this period, the issuance of Executive Order Number 31 this month, if I'm correct, June 11, it was signed on last June 11, is the institutionalization. So it's now part of a more defined policy. And what is emphasized here is that over the long period of engagement of the Philippines in the OGP process, there have been significant innovations in government processes. And in fact, acknowledged in the world stage, because there are regular OGP global summits, international summits. I've been privileged to have participated in one of them, the OGP Global Summit in Mexico City. That's in 2015. And these innovations promote transparency, social accountability, and citizen empowerment. So I had the opportunity to be part of the OGP, Philippine OGP Steering Committee from 2014 to 2019. So around 5 years. So that's under 2 presidents. So I'll be relaying what I learned from this process. I was part of the CSO part of the steering committee. As ASEC Rolly mentioned, there is 50% representation, government and non-government representatives. So in that committee, I represent academe, which actually is a kind of innovation, because I was able to raise that during the meeting after the Mexico Global Summit, and the steering committee accepted that academe should have a voice in the steering committee. So ASEC Rolly already discussed the Open Budget Survey, because the Open Budget Survey is what I would say a mainstay in the National Action Plan of OGP. the Open Budget Survey started in 2006, so ahead of the OGP. But the Philippines has been there in the Open Budget Index mechanism, has been an active partner since 2006. And the IBP that presides over the International Budget Partnership, next slide please, is a platform for measuring transparency of how public resources are raised and spent, looking at opportunities for participation in budget policy decisions and oversight by independent legislatures and audit institutions. Next slide. I'm discussing this because I was also invited to be the independent expert for the Open Budget Survey since 2017. So I underwent training in 2016 with other independent assessors of the Open Budget Survey in 2016. So I've been in 3 rounds of the Open Budget Survey. So if you look at this chart, you can see really how the Philippines has institutionalized Open Budget Survey mechanisms in a way that you can see improvements from 2010. No? We are in the 55 level. But once we surmounted the 50 level, we reached the 60 points level. So it's been consistent. And in fact, in the next slide, we see that the Philippines has been performing well. And in the latest Open Budget Survey, the Philippines ranked 19 out of 120 countries. And in the next slide, the Philippines actually ranked in the top 10 of the 2019 Open Budget Survey. Except for that very critical score that Asik Rolly mentioned, the failure to submit the midterm review, which DBM is not alone responsible because it requires data from the different agencies. Timeliness is very important. And it has to be public. And when you say public, it has to be available in the internet. That's why digital technology is very important. So we don't, in the survey, we use a lot of internet-based data. So that is now that's the gold standard right now. So you don't rely on paperwork anymore. It has to be online. Next slide. I would say that the Open Government Partnership is some kind of innovation and incubation platform. You test ideas in the OGP. And in a way, the participatory audit process has been tested for such a long time. I would trace the history of participatory auditing from the time that the Concerned Citizens of ABRA for Good Government partnered with the Commission on Audit, and that's way back in the 1990s. The group of Manang Pura Sumangil, who I got to work with in the TAN, Transparency and Accountability Network. And then, actually also in partnership with the United Nations Development Program, providing funding support. But this was continued on, and with more contemporary groups, and the OGP provided this platform for really pushing participatory auditing. And finally, it has been institutionalized in the Commission on Audit. And you can see that it's in the website of the Commission on Audit, participatory budgeting. But the real challenge here is really that it is part of a voluntary process whereby there has to be civil society organizations that are willing to do the monitoring. But these are some examples of citizen participatory audit. It's now called CPA, Citizen Participatory Audit, CPA, right? It's like a certified public accountant. So these are some of the projects that have been monitored using the CPA mechanism. What's interesting here is that it's not post-audit. It is performance audit, meaning auditing is happening while the project is being undertaken. Because Commission on Audit usually does post-audit, right, when the project is finished. So you rely on citizen monitors to look at how the project is being implemented, rather than just the financial audit that's done after a project is finished. Next slide. The Citizen Participatory Audit won an award during the OGP Global Summit in London. And the Seal of Good Local Governance is also one of the finalists in this award. So what happens is that different countries would submit a governance innovation. And there would be a short list, and there would be a selection of winners. And Citizen Participatory Audit that I mentioned in the previous slide won. I think it's a top prize. Is that correct, Asik? Top prize. No? Yes. So it's the top prize. And Seal of Good Local Governance is also nominated. And of course, the Seal of Good Local Governance provides results-based performance management mechanism. It started with the Seal of Good Housekeeping, wherein you have the full disclosure policy portal, a financial disclosure of financial documents by the LGUs. And the notion here is by incentivizing good governance, the seal has been instrumental in increasing LGU behavior that is supportive of both national and international development goals. So the SGLG, the Seal of Good Local Governance, is very important as we implement the Supreme Court ruling on Garcia Mandanas with more greater fiscal transfer from the central government to local government units. Next slide. So this is just to show you the full disclosure policy portal of the Department of Interior Local Government. It's actually part of the local government code. But this is a process of really implementing what's in the local government code. And the Seal of Good Housekeeping pushed this process forward. And the Seal of Good Local Governance continued this process and expanded the performance criteria. In the next slide, we'll see that there are now 10 criteria, Seal of Good Local Governance. What are the compliance metrics that are supposed to be followed by LGUs? Next slide. So the Seal of Good Local Governance is now a law. But the critical challenge is that we are moving not just in terms of performance through outputs, but through outcomes. Next slide, please. That's why you need additional enabling mechanisms, like on the part of the ILG, they issued a memorandum circular on the establishment of CSO desks. So this is very much aligned with the OGP, the Open Government, and the institutionalization of people's councils. So in a way, the People's Council is a mirror image of the steering committee of open government, 50-50. No? In the People's Council, you also have 50% representatives from government and 50% representatives from civil society looking at local budget. Next slide. And so this is an innovation that was undertaken by the national government through the Department of Budget and Management, the Citizens Budget. And also as part of the Philippines' participation in the Open Budget Survey. So we see how these reforms are being undertaken. We innovate and then we develop outputs. And so I was thinking in the next slide that why don't we do the citizens' budget at the local level? Since it's been done by DBM, if you look at the website of DBM, they upload citizens' budget at all phases of the budget cycle. Very, very nice, no? Yung mga infographics. Because if you just look at our budget data, it's very hard to read sometimes for a layman. So you need to provide information that works for them, that is relevant to specific stakeholders. So when I was part of the OGP steering committee, I proposed this project, a knowledge partnerships for open government. And at the time, there is the Making All Voices Count program. It's a global partnership among different global institutions, including the Institute of Development Studies based at the University of Sussex, IDS, Global Integrity based in Washington, D.C. It's a international NGO, and HIVOS, which is a Dutch-based, Netherlands-based company. So providing support to Making All Voices Count. So the challenge here that we want to address is that if you have open data or if you have open information, what's the relevance if nobody is reading the open data? Wala nang nagbabasa, no? And I actually got this idea also from Undersecretary Austin Panadero, who has always emphasized that. We have a full disclosure policy, but nobody's reading. So it's important to have what we call information intermediary. So I thought, why don't we pursue a knowledge partnerships for open government? So this would be at the local level. So mirroring the innovations happening at the national level, go down to the local level. Next slide, please. So as you can see, Making All Voices Count, it was a global initiative that supports innovation, scaling up, and research to deepen existing innovations and help harness technologies to enable citizen engagement and government responsiveness. Next slide. So this, I just took that from the website of the Making All Voices Count, MAVC. So our project aimed to enable universities to serve as infomediaries. Okay, infomediaries, information intermediaries. So meaning there would be people in the middle. You have data, you have intermediaries, you have the citizens. In developing knowledge tools for civil society organizations to understand and engage in the local budget process. At the same time, the project will strengthen the capacity of universities to serve as knowledge hubs in promoting open government. Next slide, please. So we just tested this in 3 cities, partnering with regional universities. The first was the Ateneo de Naga. They have a Center for Local Governance. So you can see here a picture of a knowledge dialogue on local budget, infographics, and development. Next slide. So Ateneo de Naga University hosted this through a portal. As you can see, if you're familiar with basketball and politics here in the country, sports and everything, ang sabi nila parating magkalaban ng Lasal tsaka Ateneo. Pero we always say, sa basketball lang po yun. It's only in basketball. But when it comes to research, and actually Dean Randy Tuanyo is a very good friend of mine. So we actually cooperate very well. So next slide, please. As an example, Ateneo de Naga was able to mobilize their faculty and students from computer science and information technology. So an information portal, what everyone should know. So you can see here that they are uh, developing, or they develop infographics, budget infographics. Next slide, please. So another example, again, another Ateneo University, Ateneo de Cagayan in Xavier University. So people were asking, aren't you teaching in LaSalle? Why are you all over the Ateneo websites? It's because of our project. Next slide, please. So we engaged the different civil society organizations and a data partnership. We enabled a data partnership between Xavier University and the civil society organizations in Cagayan de Oro City, partnering on DRRM, local budget analysis, and PWD advocacy. So they chose what areas they wanted. Okay, I was asked to wrap up. Next slide. So this is an example. So ASEC Raleigh, this is their local citizen budget, infographics developed by Xavier University, 2017 annual investment plan. And then when this came out, the city government was saying, you should also give us a copy because we want to learn. We want to use also your materials, not just the CSOs. Next slide. So Open Data Portal and the People's Council, Cagayan de Oro City now has a ordinance on or People's Council that was in the memorandum circular of the ILG. Next slide. So Central Philippine University, Iloilo. Next slide, please. So they also develop infographics. Next slide. Down to the barangay level, they look at gender and how gender and development funds are used. And actually, this is analyzing the youth budget. So I think this would be relevant as we gear up for the elections for SK, Sangguniang Kabataan, because they also have funds, right? So this is a good way of monitoring how they are using their youth development funds. Next slide. Okay, I'll just go through this, and this is an application actually of universities engage with city governments and how to be more transparent. Next slide. This is a case of De La Salle University partnering with city government of Manila because they say you are partnering with the provinces from outside Manila, but what are you doing in Manila? So we took up the challenge. So we partnered with the city government of Manila. Next slide. Okay, so we are establishing the City University Consortium. So not just De La Salle University. Next slide. Okay, as you can see in number 7, we want to develop an electronic open data dashboard that will showcase how the city government of Manila is localizing the sustainable development goals. Next slide. This has been presented in the SDG Summit hosted by NEDA. Next slide. We consulted with 16 universities. Next slide. And we are gearing up to signing a memorandum of understanding. Hopefully within the next few weeks, we will be launching this consortium of universities. Next slide. It's part of a multi-stakeholder engagement process. Next slide. And what's really important here is data governance and institutional development, strengthening the partnership between LGUs and the universities as part of this information intermediation. Next slide. So the next slides are actually from Naga City. Next slide. Okay, next slide. CBMS. Next slide. So this is the process in Naga City. Next slide. Okay, Naga City is, I think, the most advanced city right now when it comes to localizing the sustainable development goals. Very good planning officials. Willie Priles is a very good urban planner. And we can learn a lot from Naga City. They're partnering with our partner, Ateneo de Naga, and UNSCAP. Next slide. Next slide. They're following the Joint Memorandum Circular of the ILG and NEDA. Next slide. So next slide. So this is the last slide. Thank you very much. Last slide. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Kiko Magno, for that very informative presentation. It was very important, that point he made earlier, that while we do have all these information available to us thanks to the Open Government program, the question really is anyone reading these things? Are people really reading these information? And when they do read them, do they understand them? So it's also commendable that there are programs that allow people to understand how the budget works, or how these data can be analyzed or understood better. So thank you again, Dr. Kiko Magno. And our next speaker will be talking about recentering power dynamics for sustainable economic growth. He is Dr. Philip Arnold Randy Tuaño. He currently sits as Dean of the Ateneo School of Government, and he is also an associate professor at the Ateneo Department of Economics, where he serves as chairman. He served as Director 3 at the Macro Policy Unit of the National Anti-Poverty Commission back in 2001, and he is also actively involved in external networks, such as the Human Development Network and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippine Chapter. Unfortunately, Dean Randy will not be able to join us today because he's currently attending, I think, a graduation ceremony at the Ateneo today. So, but he did send us a video recording. So let us listen to Dean Randy.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this forum on the legitimacy of President Marcos Jr., entailing the need for more transparent and accountable governance. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'd like to welcome all the participants to this morning's forum. And I do apologize, I was not able to make it to the forum because of an important university event. But I hope that this video will actually suffice for this morning. I'd like to also greet my co-speakers in this forum, the President of Stat-Based ADR Institute, Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit, Assistant Secretary Rolando Toledo of the Department of Budget and Management, Dr. Francisco Magno, Kiko Magno, Trustee and Program Convener of Stat-Based ADR Institute, and Professor of Political Science and Development Studies at the LaSalle University, and also Dr. Rizan Ferrante-Calina, the Dean of the Development Academy of the Philippines, Graduate School of Public and Development Management, and Ms. Mashan Bernice Shanice Espiritu, the Policy and Regulatory Manager of Stat-Based ADR Institute. Again, my thanks for being invited to this forum, and I hope these brief remarks that I'll make to you will provide some contribution to our discussion on the necessity of greater transparency and accountability in government. Let me share with you my presentation file this morning. Thank you again to the organizers for entitling this talk, Recentering Power Dynamics for Sustainable Economic Growth. Let's review first what are the trends in economic growth that we've seen in the first year of this new administration. We've seen that there are modest gains in the economy in the new government's actually first year. If you look at the first quarter 2023 growth rate, we've seen that the GDP levels, GDP growth rates have grown at around 6.4%, which is a little bit lower than what was recorded in the first four quarters. In the four quarters in 2023, where growth actually was above 7%. And this growth was mainly due, we've seen in the past quarters, due to the growth in the services sector. What are the factors that we actually have attributed to this growth in the economy? One, we can say that the credibility of the economic team has been hailed by both local and foreign business, and also in other stakeholders in the economy, as very useful to maintain the level of and would ensure that the Philippine economy would be able to rebound after the COVID-19 pandemic. The Philippine Development Plan, the economic framework, has actually been in place since late last year. And this has guided the government through some of the economic and social policies that it will have to undertake to ensure this sustainable economic growth actually will be maintained. The government has also continued fiscal and bureaucratic reforms, including the tax reforms, the digitization of government processes, and other policy reforms in order to maintain the level of economic momentum that we have seen this past year. Although we have noted that some economic policies, including the recently legislated Maharlika Investment Forum, remain controversial. Translating these economic gains to improvements in governance seems to be a continuing challenge. So we've seen that in this early this year that the rankings of the country in various government indices doesn't seem to inspire much confidence in the political and institutional direction of the government. In February this year, in the Corruption Perception Index of the Transparency International, while the Philippines has maintained its rank to 116, public sector transparency perceptions actually still remain very low. The following month, when the Heritage Foundation released its Economic Freedom Index, the Philippines actually dropped 3 places, sorry, 9 places to number 89, mainly due to issues related to government health. But at the same time, issues related to property rights and judicial effectiveness, essentially the rule of law, has continued to be developed, be an issue for the country. And in the following month, in April of this year, the country actually dropped 3 places to number 19, to 66 out of 104, in terms which actually the country has been affected by its ranking in terms of leadership and foresight, and the implementation of robust laws and policies. This has also affected the improvements in country's measures in terms of other development indicators, including the Human Development Index. In the release of the September 2022 rankings, the country actually declined by 3 places to 116 out of 191 countries. And also in terms of its environmental goals, in terms of the Sustainable Development Goal Index, also dropping by 3 places to 98 in the Sustainable Development Goal Index rankings that was released just this month. And therefore, the issue of really translating how these economic gains would result in improvements in governance seems to be a question, and therefore much more vigorous impact on developing policies and programs would have to be actually be needed. We know that the importance really of transparency and accountability is to ensure that there are trust and norms in in the government. And and we know that communities that are united and collaborative, where markets actually thrive and flourish, and and governments actually shine, will only be will be a result of this collaboration and activities. Competition in markets and elsewhere, we know that may bring out the best and most efficient in us. But it is actually through cooperation in general that actually builds societies, brings progress, and also nurtures civilizations. Communities we know that are fragmented and in various forms of conflict, hinder market transactions and make government a battleground for political power instead of serving public trust. We know that there's a very rich literature on the relationship between social capital and economic growth, and this underpins many of the policies on good governance that are needed to be undertaken. Whiteley, for example, examines the relationship between social capital and economic growth in a sample of 34 countries in the period of 1970 to 1992 within the framework of a neoclassical model of economic growth. And his findings suggest that social capital has an impact on growth which is at least as strong as that of human capital or education, which has been much of the focus of the work of the endogenous growth theory. Bolili and others found that the level of trust as a measure of social capital and growth are significantly and positively correlated, and that the high level of trust also has an indirect effect on economic activity through its effect on institutional development. Roth also notes that the finding on interpersonal trust has a positive effect on economic growth, and this has matured into some certainty in the international scientific community. This positive result is often most associated with the academic work of Nack and Kiefer and also Zach and Nack. And the Nack and Kiefer article actually is also used to paraphrase the relationship between trust and economic development. And therefore, we know that this finding, the importance of strengthening social norms, is very an important feature of governance in a society. Government certainly has a strong role in order to build social trust and norms in the country. In the 2019 World Value Survey, on the question of whether most people in your own country can be trusted, the Philippines only scored 5.3% in the affirmative, compared to Thailand at 28.9%, Singapore at 34.4%, and China at 63.5%. The roots of the lack of social trust and norms in the country can actually be rooted based on several factors that affect social norms. So these include economic inequalities. We know that the Gini Index, a measure of income inequality in the country, actually have been high compared to other Southeast Asian countries. The many social injustices that haven't been resolved also contribute to this lack of social norms and social trust. Inaccessibility to quality education for many, we know that there still remains not to be a greater push towards more broader education in our society. And the wide difference as in educational outcomes also affect the ability of individuals and communities to be able to talk to and respond to one another. The presence also of corruption, widespread political dynasties, and bad governance contribute to this issue of social trust and norms. And the promotion of class conflict and social media worsened by disinformation and fake news also have contributed to the lack of the ability of Filipinos to relate more closely to one another. The 2023 to 2028 PDP framework on governance actually remains a way forward to enable to address this issue of participation and engagement. One way that the plan envisions that this could be done is for more meaningful inclusion and better quality of participation, more intensified information transparency and access, the right sizing of government functions and structure, and competence and future readiness of the government and its public servants. The recent executive order issued also this month on institutionalizing open governance can actually assist in actually this effort. But let us also point also to three other important points which the government actually may wish to consider in trying to ensure that participation and engagement can actually be undertaken. about stakeholder participation in society, especially the highest level of government, can also bring about this greater social trust in government institutions. While there's been a very strong emphasis on including business in government policy making, especially the creation of the Private Sector Advisory Council and other advisory councils of the of business throughout the government. There's a need also to broaden participation of sectors in economic and social issues. And in this slide, what is actually shown here are the many government institutions that actually require participation of different marginalized sectors of this economy. And their participation needs to be actually strengthened and emphasized in the coming years to ensure that they're able to participate in market decision making as well. So agencies as the National Anti-Poverty Commission, the Presidential Agrarian Reform Council, the Fisheries and Aquatic Resources Management Councils, and the like are very important. So meaningful provisions for engagement with cabinet level bodies and also legislators are actually more important. So it's not only at the level of budget development and accountability, but also ensuring that participation at the local level, including the local development councils, are actually being undertaken. A second area which government also might want to look at, especially as we uh, the the national, the barangay village and Sangguniang Kabataan elections are going to be undertaken. But the greater role for participation of groups, especially in local legislative bodies, have need to be undertaken. In the Participate project, which the School of Government, as one of the stakeholders, have been undertaking, we see that there are many areas for reform that can be undertaken uh, in the coming years, also in the coming years, to ensure that there's greater access to elections, and also the vote by a broader segment of society. So many of these areas include the areas of campaign finance. So how campaigns are actually supported financially, and also looking into the area of maybe support, government support for political parties, can be an area where political participation can actually also be developed. So looking at voters' education, voters' registration and verification, and also strengthening the role of political parties as institutions that allow for greater access to the political structures are also very much important. Another area that participation and engagement can actually be examined is to look at a policy framework and trying to identify interventions that support local economic development that target inequities in political and economic participation in different types of provinces characterized by differing levels of political participation, ownership of enterprises by local politicians, and institutional capacities of local groups. So at the Ateneo School of Government and the Ateneo Policy Center, we've actually undertaken an analysis of anthropology and also differentiated different provinces and developed a typology of different areas in the country, typified by different characteristics, including political and economic competition, and also the ability of the local government in order to address pressing social and economic issues in their areas. And we found out that this table actually might be able to help in these capacity building efforts. So for areas where, for example, that there's very little business dynamism, uh, but these same provinces, no, have high ownership of local businesses by politicians, but the province has a low uh, fat dynasty share. So these are provinces in the A1 cell. Institutional capacity building, the state provision of public goods, and the promotion of entrepreneurship are very much also important. But in the A2 cell, where you have a high fat dynasty share, the non-state provision of public goods, so ensuring private sector participation in the delivery of education and health services, no? Local governments partnering with them, no? It will actually also contain, will be important, no? Ensuring the growth of the local economy. So differentiating interventions, no, among local governments, no, would be important in ensuring that more broader participation in the economic and political dimensions can be actually be undertaken. And this is a reflection that is important, that our government agencies looking at the effects, no, or implications, no, of the Bandana's ruling will have to also take a look into. With that, we thank you from the Ateneo School of Government. Hopefully, these thoughts and reflections will be able to contribute to the discussion, enriching the discussion this morning, on how to ensure that greater transparency and accountability and greater social cohesion can be undertaken in the country. Maraming salamat.
All right, thank you very much, Dean Randy Tuanyo. Very interesting presentation and interesting point again, like as he said, that there is really a need for a more meaningful participation, stakeholder participation in government and in also the different sectors of society, especially in the economic and social issues. It complements actually what were presented by Professor Dindo Manhit, by Asik Rolly, and also by Dr. Kiko Magno. And I think it will also complement what will be presented by our next speaker, who will now discuss moving forward recommendations to strengthen transparency and accountability in government. Our next speaker is Dr. Lizan Perante Calina. She is currently the Dean of the Development Academy of the Philippines, Graduate School of Public and Development Management. She earned her doctorate and Master of Public Administration degrees from the University of the Philippines, National College of Public Administration and Governance. And prior to joining the academe, she was a former media practitioner, and she also served in the government for 28 years. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Dean Lizan Perante Calina.
Thank you so much, Joyce. A pleasant morning to everyone, and my deepest appreciation to Professor Dindo for the invitation extended to me to be part of this morning's discussion. And likewise, my greetings to my co-speakers. We have Asak Toledo. I hope I'll be able to pitch our programs and projects for DBM to fund it. And a good friend and a colleague, Dr. Kiko Magno. And my pleasure also to be reunited with my former student, Shanice. So good morning again to everyone. My presentation will be on the recommendations on how to strengthen transparency and accountability in government, really taking off from the discussions that have been articulated earlier. I would like to present to you the DAP as the country's premier institution for the capacity building of public sector human resources since 1973. So I was not born during that time, but I'm glad that I'm part of, strengthening the education platform wherein we are able to change mindsets, because that's very important. While we have development goals, we need to have a capacity building development framework in order for us to implement all of these. So dapat magkasama po talaga lahat yan. And in the Development Academy of the Philippines, we have the Graduate School of Public and Development Management. And what pushed for this one is the introduction, or was the introduction of the Master in Public Development Management in 1991, and that was the time when new public management movement was pushed by Osborne and Gabler to address inefficiencies, ineffectiveness in government, and it introduced likewise public-private partnership, digital governance, and so on and so forth. And all of these things that we are seeing right now, of course, are part of new public management. So we have the Graduate School of Public and Development Management. And also, with that, in the next slide, these uh, talks about our vision and mission, wherein our values are incorporated, like integrity, professionalism, patriotism, and resiliency. So all of these are indicators of transparency and accountability, which are considered as cornerstones of good governance. So we anchor our programs, projects, and activities with the current framework of the leadership of President Bongbong Marcos, likewise with the PDP and the ambition natin of NEDA. And internationally speaking, we are taking into consideration the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So in that pronouncement of President Marcos, we are now looking into digitalization, on how are we going to make our services faster and effective, and of course relevant in order to address the needs of the citizens. So again, in the framework that we are using together with Dr. Alex Brillantes, who is also my mentor and a co-author, we have this frameworks on good governance, and it was published by Emerald and other leading publication entities, and likewise by the United Nations. What the United Nations is talking about is that, yes, we have well-crafted laws, we have well-crafted policies, but still we are facing governance gaps. Why? Well, because one is behavioral, system constraints, and culture likewise. So the United Nations articulated that it's important for us to change mindsets. And going digital is also a mindset. So later on, I'll discuss, this is also mentioned by ASEC Toledo and by Dr. Kiko Magno and also Professor Dindo, the importance of private sector in helping the government address the current problems that we have right now. So changing mindsets we have there, and we are incorporating this across our curriculum, and likewise in our research products, no? And among others. And this will also answer our SDGs, particularly goal number 16, and that is developing strong institutions, peace, and just and inclusive societies, of course. So access to government services, access to information will really relate to digitalization and looking at more effective and efficient services. So in the next slide, we'll talk about the importance of public servants. That's why we have the Development Academy of the Philippines. Now. So we have training programs, we have education, and we have researches. No? And in that, what we are saying here is really we have to change the mindsets of our public servants. That's why in implementing SDGs, one of the indicators there is going digital. But how are we going to go digital? No? So these are the steps in changing mindsets. Actually, it's one voluminous document, but it's very helpful for all of us. And we are giving this out to our students in order for them to really look at on how are we going to change mindsets. So there are certain skills and competencies that we need if we go digital. What are these skill sets and competencies that we need in order for us to go digital? So again, transparency, we know that, but again, we are looking at how are we going to establish or re-establish integrity and honesty in all dealings in the government sector. And in the next slide, of course, you are looking at access to information. So a lot of these things have been delved into earlier by our previous speakers. But the question is, how are we going to move towards that direction, being transparent, and accountable? Accountability is not only about exacting money or taking care of properties, right? But it's also the evolving definition there is performance. So that's why we are addressing the concerns of our public managers and development managers in the Philippine bureaucracy by giving them relevant training programs and education platform for them to really establish and promote, the frameworks that we have been using. So this one, of course, we know that there are different levels of accountability, but we are providing framework in order for us to go to the direction that we want to, in the next time horizon that we are identifying. So again, we are faced by all of these challenges and issues. They have been there for many decades already, but again, how are we going to address all of these? At the graduate school level, we have provided a number of courses already, and these are our degree programs. The beauty of DAP Graduate School is that we do customized programs. So we really address the needs of our civil servants. For example, we have a program on MPM, Major in Development and Security. So this is focused on the needs of the armed forces of the Philippines. So we are on more than a decade of academic collaboration already. With the DOH, we have the health systems and development. We have programs from BARM, likewise, for the BARM officials, and a lot more. So with that, we also have our executive and certificate courses. So as you can see there, we have security, we have youth development, but I'd like to pitch on the public budgeting ASEC Toledo. So when we offer this course, actually, there are a lot of interested individuals from the government sector who would like to know the principles in public budgeting and management. So around 200 of them in one course, and it's really an awe. We really appreciate the efforts of our civil servants who are interested in looking at public budgeting, because this one for them, it's technical. So what they're asking from us, is it really technical? We don't know how to compute, and so on and so forth, the mathematical equation. What we are telling them, it's about the principles on how you're going to operationalize budgeting in your respective offices. So those are just some of our certificate courses, and the model that we are applying is this one. It is ladderized, or we offer stackable courses. If you get a certificate course, you have 3 credit units that will be applicable to your master's degree program. I think that's one of the features of education right now. So with that model, of course, in the next slide, we also develop our Knowledge Innovation Hub Lab. So in that Knowledge Innovation Hub Lab, one of the banner programs that we promote is Futures Thinking and Policy Foresight. Dr. Kiko is our research fellow as well. So we've produced a number of knowledge products already. So the government is funding us through the General Appropriations Act. So we've produced 15 full research papers and a lot more. And this is more on sustainable development goals using futures thinking as a lens. So we are already on our 3rd year, and in the next research agenda that we'll be having, we will focus on digitalization. So with that, we also crafted another one, ASEC Toledo. We have this already with PCUO. This is for FOI. You mentioned this a while ago. So we developed this kind of program. It's a certificate course on strategic e-governance for the freedom of information officers. So last year, we conducted one, and that is a preliminary course. But this time, we are deepening it with these modules. Of course, we need to understand the context, the Philippine administrative system, data ethics and integrity, trends and innovation, and digital governance and FOI, transformation. But at the end of the course, they will be able to produce a paper wherein they will operationalize that in their respective organization. And in consonance with that one, we have this meeting with PISAC, with the Private Sector Advisory Council, and we will develop a digital leadership course. So that is in collaboration with NUS, for the implementation. So this is inclusive because we'll be involving other universities and other experts on digitalization, digital governance, and so on and so forth. So what are we gonna do with all of these things now? Well, one, of course, we're using the frameworks that we have, the NPM, but we would like to move forward. We want to be anticipatory. That's why we're using foresight as a lens in the digital era. So we are in the 21st century and we cannot avoid it. What we can do is really to maximize. No? And maximizing it, we want to have, of course, a forward-looking society using foresight lens, foresight as a policy lens in the digital era. Actually, this is Japan's 5.0, but we are benchmarking on their current framework that they are using. So in using that as a lens, again, we consider the nexus of people, policy, and technology. That's why it will go beyond quality of life. It will go beyond common goals and common interests of the Filipino people. So with that, the Society 5.0 from Japan's perspective, it's about human-centered society, and we want that as well in the Philippines. And if we contextualize that and indigenize that, what is that? So it's more on the hiraya. Hiraya is our aspirations as Filipino people. May our dreams come true. May all the blessings be upon us. So with that, I'd like again to take you to DEP Graduate School, wherein we equip leaders, we develop competencies towards nation building. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Dean Lizan. Very inspiring presentation. We look forward to having those FOI leaders soon, especially with the information that is quite difficult to access from the government. All right. Our last speaker will provide her assessment on President Marcos Jr.'s government transparency and accountability initiatives. She is Ms. Mashan Bernice Shanice Espiritu. She is the Policy and Regulatory Manager of Stratbase and also co-convener of the Democracy Watch Philippines. An academic and researcher by profession, Shanice is also a part-time lecturer at the Political Science Department of the De La Salle University. She finished her master's degree in public policy at the Australian National University, where she specialized in integrity and anti-corruption policy. Let us welcome Ms. Shanice Espiritu.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm the last speaker, but I hope that you'll still indulge this presentation that I'm going to be having. So before that, I'd like to recognize all our speakers and the rich discussions that they've provided this morning. So of course, we have Professor Dindo, who has already provided us with an amazing discussion on the legitimacy of the elections, and also the Pulse Asia research that has been brought up, which I will also be referencing later in this talk. We also have, of course, our ASEC Toledo, who has provided us leaps and strides on the DBM and all these things that will continue to enhance transparency and accountability within the finance system. And of course, we have Dr. Kiko as well. He's also a colleague in the DLSU Political Science Department. He spoke about open government, which I will also be discussing here as well. We have, of course, our Dean Randy Tuanyo, who isn't here, but he's also discussed political participation and openness and the importance of it. And lastly, of course, Dean Lizan giving us the importance of education and educating our public sector professionals and making sure that the principles of transparency and accountability are enshrined in government practice. So I'm hoping that through this talk, I'll still be able to contribute a little more in terms of providing an assessment. And as mentioned, I'm also doing this under Democracy Watch Philippines, where I am a co-convener as well. All right, so as I mentioned, this presentation is based off an occasional paper that I wrote last April, highlighting accountability and transparency in the administration. So it's entitled The First Year, a comparative assessment of transparency and accountability initiatives during the Marcos Duterte and Aquino administrations. Now, the question is, why would I compare the three administrations on their first years? To me, while we are looking at the assessment, or we are looking at after June 30, coming into SONA, and even after SONA, there are going to be a lot of different assessments on the performance of the administration. But I wanted to see how these fared in terms of the other administrations as well. Because there might be criticisms, there might be leaps and gains, but we have to, in order for us to look at it through an objective lens, we need to see the past two administrations as well. Now, one thing I'll have to mention regarding this paper, since it was published in April, there is a need to constantly update this body of work as well, as there are constantly new developments arising and unfolding in this area, as mentioned, for instance, by our ASIC here. He mentioned the EO, institutionalizing the open government partnership. So we also have EO 31, or Executive Order 31, that was signed June 20, yes. And also we had, as he mentioned previously, Executive Order 29 on reforming the budget system and enshrining transparency and accountability. Now, so I want to look at this from a contextual lens in order to understand why the administration has gone into this certain direction. So the backdrop of the Marcos Jr. administration, as listed here, we have, of course, our pandemic, COVID-19, and its aftershocks to society and economy. We have a polarized public due to many political differences, both high and low. We have low rankings as well that among world indices as a result of the previous administration. And lastly, what we've seen from the past administrations, there was incompetence, it's not necessarily pertaining to one official, but throughout, people were able to understand that the government wasn't able to reach out to them and deliver services because of the COVID-19 pandemic and all the problems that it has caused. So there was a general lack of transparency that we also saw during that area. And one thing that can be observed, especially from the last point as mentioned here, is that there were also corruption scandals that plagued President Duterte's final years in office. But what was highlighted, it wasn't actually corruption, but the inability to provide services, the inability to provide government help in a way. And these were inefficiencies within the system that our previous speakers mentioned as well. And it was not only just pertaining to the executive, but down to the lowest rungs of the government. So this was the context that the Marcos administration was dealt with. So it wasn't just corruption, but there was a huge issue of inefficiency and the lack of transparency, especially involving government contracts in the wake of the pandemic. Now, I just want to reference briefly this, the Corruption Perceptions Index score changes. So one thing, when we look at the Corruption Perceptions Index, is we can't compare this on a year-to-year basis because these trends are too small, but we have to look at the trends from a longitudinal perspective. So we see here that in 2012 to 2014, there was a rise, and then it suddenly, there was a decline in score again. And in our scores, when your score is higher on the Corruption Perceptions Index, it means that a government is much cleaner, or there's less perceptions of corruption. But when the score is lower, then there are more. Essentially, this means that people perceive the government to be more corrupt. Now, we see that same trend in 2017 and 2018. And we see that these were the times where the administration, both the Aquino administration and the Duterte administration, these were in a way, the midterms, in a way, of these administrations where the corruption, their corruption programs were at its height. But we see that, of course, with the decline, it came down to a decline in 2020 to 2022, just because of the pandemic and what it's caused. The next one is the World Governance Indicator. So the World Governance Indicator has 6 different dimensions, or 6 indicators. And we see here, I've taken only 2, which is on voice and accountability, and the second one is on the control of corruption. So we see that there's a difference comparing the East Asian Pacific averages and the Philippines. And in terms of the control of corruption, it's the same picture for the Philippines. Now, what I want to say is all of these are also based on independent survey experts like Dr. Kiko and many other different government data that's available online as well. So we also need to take this with a pinch of salt. But this provides us with, in a way, a general picture of how the government has gone throughout the years. Now, so what I want to emphasize is that it is only natural that the direction of the PBBM administration would be geared towards addressing and responding to the issues that lay before them. So now the question that we have here that we have to answer is, has the current administration addressed the issues that lay before them? And my answer here is yes, with a caveat. So first one, there is an apparent lack of anti-corruption messaging, note the term messaging, under the Marcos administration in contrast to the 2 administrations. But the reason why I say that there's a caveat on messaging is because it does not mean that the reforms are not present. There are reforms present as mentioned by our speakers, but this has been reframed in the areas of transparency and accountability. Now, if we are noticing, for comparison, just to give us an idea of what I mean by this, we need to take a look at the Benigno Aquino administration and his platform. In general, we remember daang matuwid, we remember kung walang korap, walang mahirap. But in the end, we see that his administration has failed to achieve the long-term gains of this anti-corruption policy that he paraded. And Duterte's famous slogan, we also have change is coming, where he promised, of course, to end crime, corruption, and illegal drugs. As we see, not all aspects of that promise have been met as well. In a way, what we have to remember about these administrations, not just the current president's administration, but the past 2, is that they also responded to the signs of the times in a way. They responded, or essentially these platforms that catapulted them to the presidency were a response to the political environment that existed. For instance, Aquino responded to the corruption that was existing under the allegations under the Arroyo administration. And at the same time, Duterte responded to the waning public trust coming from the past, from the Aquino administration. But the thing that's interesting, and I want to point this difference out, is that the Marcos administration was met with inefficiencies in the system. The Marcos administration was met with waning, essentially, the understanding that there needs to be new systems set in place. And that is the reason why we go here next to the Marcos administration's 8-point socioeconomic agenda in the near and medium term. So, in a way, his socio-economic agenda was crafted to essentially respond to these concerns that the public needed. For instance, as mentioned by Professor Dindo a while ago, public concerns ranged from controlling the prices of goods, controlling inflation, higher pay for workers, and graft and corruption only came in 5th. And so, of course, naturally, the government would respond to the need for creating jobs, for making sure that macroeconomic fundamentals and that the country was able to come back up on its feet again. And because of all the scarring, as mentioned, coming from the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, purchasing power of families comes in as a way to control the rising prices of inflation. So, in a way, I can say that the Marcos administration has been responding, and that is the way that this socioeconomic agenda was crafted. I won't go through each of them, but I want to focus I want to focus on ensuring sound macroeconomic fundamentals, where there are areas, these means in a way to ensure macroeconomic fundamentals are set in place are through improving bureaucratic efficiencies and making sure that there is sound fiscal management. And again, as I mentioned, all our speakers have contributed to this discussion already a while ago in a very rich way. And so I'll just go briefly through them as well. So of course, as I mentioned, this is a study that was done in April, but again, it's a body of work that's constantly evolving, such as digitization and its importance. So I agree, once again, I reiterate that while the messaging is not there, there are anti-corruption reforms, and these are done through the need for transparency and accountability. And these are further emphasized in the way that the Marcos admin has been crafting, or it has been creating its executive orders and policy pronouncements. What are these? So the first one, as I mentioned a while ago, under the socioeconomic agenda, is improving bureaucratic efficiency. So what we have here as a comparison is, of course, the need to digitize. So we have our e-governance and e-government bills, which is something that we track in our institute as well. And we see that this has moved already, this has been passed on the third reading in the House. At the same time, we have the e-government Philippines Super App, which has been launched just recently as well. And constant messages of President Marcos Jr. himself saying that there is a need to digitize up to 95% of government services. And our speakers have constantly been saying in the past the importance, even Dean Tuanyo, he's been saying the importance of the need to digitize because it allows us to break information barriers, and at the same time, it allows people to have access to government services. The thing is, it also dissuades, as mentioned a while ago, the many types of petty corruption from ASEC Toledo. It dissuades petty corruption in many forms because there is a lack of people-to-people interactions where informal transactions such as bribes can happen. So one thing interesting here is that the DBM, and of course we've seen the updated numbers a while ago, but in one of the DBM pronouncements in the releases is that 15.6 billion, but as we saw a while ago, this number is much higher than that. So it's around 23, is that right, ASEC? So we see that the current government is really pushing for this digitalization to become a reality. And I think that at this point, when looking at it from an anti-corruption perspective, this is a way for us to make sure that transparency is achieved in not only in the higher levels of government, but up to service delivery as well. The next one is ensuring sound fiscal management and budget reforms. And we see that this was mentioned by ASEC Toledo as well with the PBBM bill. And of course, cash-based budgeting. I won't go into this too much because this was mentioned a while ago and the importance of it. But cash-based budgeting has also been seen as a legislative priority. And it is constantly undergoing a lot of processes both in the House and in the Senate as well. And this cash-based budgeting has been seen from the Duterte administration to the current Marcos Jr. administration. And what this provides us with is an idea of continuity across administrations in terms of budget reforms. Now, this is my second to the last slide where I briefly outline a comparison from the first year. As much as possible was from the first year, but in order to link it back to cash-based budgeting, I put this as well, even if the EO was in 2019. Now, in the first year, we saw the Aquino government committing to the open government partnership as well, by making sure that it is one of its founding members. We see this in EO 131 as well under Duterte. And in Marcos Jr., we see a continuity of these reforms as well. So we have under Aquino the approval of the Good Governance and Anti-Corruption Plan, and cashless and paperless PhilJeps, which is a digitization effort with the national government portal as well. Under Duterte, we've seen something more akin to service delivery and transparency and accountability through citizens' complaint hotlines, there was the purging that happened, and of course, establishment of an anti-corruption institution, the PACC, which was later taken away. But the cash-based budgeting is something that is continuing throughout the administration from Duterte to Marcos Jr. Lastly, we see that there is digital transformation. We have the super app, we have the cash-based budgeting, and of course, the new executive order institutionalizing the open government partnerships. Now, I focused on my paper comparing the three administrations in their first year. But one thing I want to highlight is that in the Marcos Jr. administration, in his first year, we already see gains that have happened from different administrations as well. So this does not mean, and again I reiterate, that while there is no messaging, there are initiatives that are currently being pushed that would help us gain more transparency and accountability. Now, moving on into the second year and beyond. What we have to understand is that the Marcos Jr. has already set up the foundations of its reform agendas in the areas of transparency and accountability. And as from the assessment I did, these are good initiatives that need to be pushed and that need to be continued further on, as they have already been established and they are part of the government's socio-economic agenda for the next 6 years. Now, an emphasis on a collaborative approach, which was a call made by Professor Dindo a while ago, is necessary. This coalition that we speak of is necessary in order to ensure that there is a transparent, there is an accountable, and a responsive government for the next 5 years. And of course, the challenge to us, the public, would be to support and to constantly support the government in ensuring that these promises that we have are met. And one possible recommendation coming out of this would be to make sure that the government would be to call for maybe stronger anti-corruption messaging. While the initiatives are good and they are already existing and are in place, one thing to ensure that the government and to make sure that the people also feel and understand that the government is pursuing these initiatives is to make sure that the government will have stronger messaging on anti-corruption. So I leave you all with an optimistic note on a call to action that speaks of the coalition that was mentioned a while ago. So I was thinking of this quote a while ago, looking at our speakers and the diversity that we have here, and even in the room as well. It takes a village to raise a child, we all know that. But I think that it takes a nation to enshrine these shared values of transparency and accountability. And my hope today, and leaving you on a good note, is that these initiatives that we are met with in terms of budget, in digitalization, in education, and open government, I hope that this will continue to build upon each other to enshrine these values that we want, not only in government, but also in society at large. So thank you, everyone, and good morning to you all.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Shanice Espiritu. I'm sure many of you have some questions for our speakers, so we'll take on that now. We will now start our open forum. So again, may we ask our speakers to join us in front, ASEC Rolly Toledo, Dr. Kiko Magno, Dean Lizan Kalina, and Ms. Shanice Espiritu to join us in front, please. And to our attendees here in the venue, should you have any question for our speakers, you may raise your hand and we'll recognize you to ask your question. Or if you're feeling shy and do not feel like asking questions directly, you can just write your questions on the pieces of paper on your table right now. And to our participants who are monitoring us via Zoom or via Facebook Live, you can leave your questions in the Q&A box in the lower part of your screen. So again, may we call on, please take your seats to our speakers. Yeah, we can turn this off. Maybe we can turn this off. Let's turn this off. Okay. All right. Here's your mic, sir. You can share it for later. And okay. So very interesting discussion. quite a lot to process. And it's been only a year since the start of the new administration. So to jumpstart our discussion, maybe I would like to ask for your assessment. It's been a year of this, the Marcos Jr. administration. How would you assess the performance of the new administration insofar as governance is concerned, especially in affecting political reforms, uh, in ensuring transparency and accountability in government? Asek, would you like to start? Are you satisfied with how the government is right now? Although I'm sure you're from the government, so how is it so far, sir?
Yeah, this is on. Actually, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me? It's on, pero hindi siya narinig. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, as mentioned by Shan, um, yes, we're just continuing what we have done so far in the past, from the past Aquino administration to the third as presented. And of course, we are still more reforms we've been implementing as far as the transparency, accountability, and being open. That's why what we are doing right now is institutionalizing those reforms that we have originally implementing in terms of budgeting, in terms of governance, and in terms of course, how citizens can actively participate in the process. So I guess from our end, it's not for me to probably assess what the Sorry. Okay. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. So ourselves. Okay. So I guess yes, from our end, yes, we are of course we're stepping to a next level of transformation in terms of what we have done already in the past. I've been, as mentioned, I've been with these three administrations, and I saw how the government working as far as how are we going to reform the government in all aspects of governance.
Is there a huge improvement, sir?
Oh, yes, very much. As far as you have seen already, one manifestation is as far as the survey was presented earlier by Dr. Kiko. As you can see, we started from the bottom of at least and satisfying what's supposed to be being transparent, and of course, in terms of the open budget survey. So there you are. That's already a proof that as far as government's concerned, we're improving in terms of that kind of reforms that we are implementing in the government, specific for the DBM, of course. Okay, because we saw that we need to really, in terms of publishing our reports, in terms of publishing our documents, so that is available to the public, and that is very important because we want the public to know what the government is doing, what the government is investing in what particular programs and projects. So that's, I think, that's already a manifestation as far as the government is doing.
So one thing that I emphasized a while ago as a principle is the importance of continuity across administrations, because reforms and political will, they take over time. And it's easy, coming from maybe the private sector or a CSO to criticize the government. But one thing that we can see here is that through digitalization, which we've seen from the past administrations, the reform on budget, which is very much important, this open government partnership, and even the FOI, which was mentioned, which was mentioned briefly in some of the speakers a while ago. We see a continuity in this. So for a short answer, I think that it is doing adequate in terms of its accountability and transparency initiatives. But as I mentioned, going into the next years forward, maybe there needs to be this messaging that this is what we are doing. Because as mentioned by Dr. Kiko a while ago, there are a lot of people there is an open government, for instance, but they don't know how to utilize it. And that's the problem, because people may complain about the lack of transparency when there are these initiatives that are present and it's just not being utilized.
In that observation, I have answer actually. As a matter of fact, okay. Sorry, when okay. As a matter of fact, we have just already have technical working group we met yesterday. As a matter of fact, to really look how this open government partnership reached to the ground. So that's why we have this what we call the advocacy campaign moving forward with this in this period from August to December. We're going down to the regions to really advocate this open government, not only within the national government agencies, but at the local level. And there are already existing open government platform that we have already, which is being done partnership with the FOI, the ILG, and the DBM, which is what we call the Dagyao session, wherein CSOs, citizens can actively participate in the discussion that is going to not only in the national government agencies, but also the region, provinces, and even at the barangay level. So that's how this government is really pursuing the what we call citizens' participation in the process.
Yeah, I echo the same perspectives no, with Shanice and Asek Toledo. I'd like to emphasize that public sector reform initiatives should be dynamic. And what I am seeing right now, the reforms are evolving since then. And the current administration is sustaining the gains. And as mentioned earlier by Asek Toledo, we are now in the stage of institutionalizing what have been promoted already, no? What are those areas of reforms that need to be institutionalized, and what are those that need to be revisited and retooled and reimagined? And likewise, communication is very important. No? How do we put the right message across? Because we have so many reform policies already. And what we need is to really, as I mentioned in the presentation earlier, education is one that is addressing the gaps, no, the governance gaps, and the training and the changing of mindsets of the civil servants towards the so-called digitalization, because we are already in the 21st century. And what I like in the current administration is that the contextualization. We are moving towards that kind of era, digital era for that matter, 21st century. The reforms are all aligned on that. And what we are doing is capacitating our civil servants, giving them the 21st century skills and competencies. Thank you.
So I would just like to add that now that there are enabling policies and process of institutionalization, I would like to echo what Dean Lisan mentioned, the need for capacity building, more investments. So we need to provide roadmap and organizational assessment. Digital transformation has been mentioned by the President a lot of times, so the different government agencies are doing their digital maturity assessment. So it's a matter of translating policy from paper to actual mechanisms. So in terms of digital maturity, it appears that many of our government agencies are maybe on a range of 1 to 5. They're mostly on level 3. So there is a need really to build more capacity. And since it's an ecosystem, we also would like to bring in the stakeholders, the citizens, and perhaps also strengthen civic education and the appreciation of data. And we have to move data from into knowledge, and that requires research.
And just to add on what Dr. Kiko said, sir, just to clarify, what you presented earlier, fiscal management programs, are these already being implemented, or these are just plans? Just
The cash budgeting system is now being implemented as we started that in 2019.
yes, sir.
As far as the BTMS or the budget treasury management system, it's not being rolled out, but it stuck. I mean to say, stop given some issues and concern. But we are reinstalling that again, the budget treasury management system, and of course with the GIPMIS, given that issue once again of the Executive Order number 29, the President signed that all government agencies should come. We have to have developed that integrated financial management system. That is why that's the focus now of the PFM sector, which is basically headed by the Secretary of the DBM together with Secretary of Finance, NEDA, and of course, Commission on Audit together with the Bureau of the Treasury. So that's we are embarking right now as to the developing that integrated financial management information system.
All right. And sir, you also mentioned the FOI measure, which is also a commitment under the Open Government Partnership. Yes, because I've been hearing, sir, and we've been reading, of course, the perhaps the shortcomings in the implementation of the FOI. What can you say about that, sir?
Okay. As far as the legislation is concerned, yes, that is probably that cannot be answered by us, but of course our legislators, in particular Senate and of course the Congress. But as far as the FOA is concerned, I would like to say that there's already gains that we have already as far as FOA, because right now at least around 61 local budget issuance as far as freedom of information has been signed and it has been a law in the implementation at the local government units already. And to take note, just recently, the last week, we have this ICIC, the International Conference of Information, which was attended by the President. That's a keynote speaker. And I think we have already gained so as far as the freedom of information. But of course, looking forward still of having that law, okay, to be passed.
Do you think it will be passed, sir? Is there a
Well,
chance?
with this administration at the same time with the push from the executive, I guess we're looking forward that sooner or later we'll have that freedom of information law.
Okay. We have a question from one of our friends from the media. Magandang umaga.
Hello.
Hi, good morning. I'm Maricel Halili from TV5. My question is for Dr. Magno and Mrs. Spiritu. Yesterday, President Bongbong Marcos himself said that his grade is still is incomplete, at least in terms of agriculture. Good morning. Once again, I'm Maricel Halili from TV5. My question is for Dr. Magno and Mrs. Spiritu. Yesterday, President Bongbong Marcos himself mentioned that his grade is incomplete, at least in the field of agriculture. How would you rate the president's performance in terms of governance and transparency, corruption for his first year in Malacanang?
I think let's just follow that because he's very frank and he recognized the incompleteness. So I believe that efforts can be much more complete if there is greater investment. For example, digital transformation requires digital infrastructure, so investments in digital infrastructure, connectivity, as well as capacity building for the civil service. So I think those are types of investments that are needed, and ASEC Toledo already mentioned the needed legislation. So these are very necessary. So this is the first year of the administration, so we have to give leeway to the administration. So a lot of things are needed.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of a rating, one, we have to understand, as mentioned by Dr. Kiko, that this is a political honeymoon period. So naturally, one, there is some leeway that we'll have to give to the president, but at the same time, of course, he's setting up, essentially this is a time where even legislature is setting up itself in terms of the way that its own priorities through the LEDAC as well. And even President Marcos in his admission that it's not complete. So I think that, as mentioned by Dr. Kiko, it's very much important for us to just sustain the gains and to allow the president some more room to breathe and some more room to be able to move forward in terms of that. But speaking from what I've mentioned a while ago, just to re-echo that mention on anti-corruption, transparency, and accountability. we are looking at the current policies right now, and I think that while the president has made sure that these are his priorities, as mentioned in the SONA, we also have other moving parts of the government, such as the legislature, that will need to also support the president in his initiatives towards transparency and accountability. In the nature of anti-corruption, I mentioned that maybe more messaging is needed for that. As you know, because the people, this is what the people need to see, that there is an active move towards curbing corruption in government. Even if there already is, there needs to be an obvious take that this is the direction that we are going. And essentially, anti-corruption, like pursuing transparency and accountability, will support his own agendas, like increasing investments and increasing the foreign direct investments and increasing development throughout the nation. So, yeah, that's going to be my answer.
Just one more question, is it okay? What do you think of the decision or the choice of President Bongbong Marcos when it comes to his cabinet secretaries? Are you satisfied?
Okay. Well, that's a good question. As they say, when you're thrown a hard question, you usually say it's a good question. But I can't speak for the way that the cabinet secretaries have been moving, because they're not individuals on their own; they're institutions. If the effectivity is only as good as the way that their institution moves as well. If this is the direction an institution wants to move forward in, then no matter how much they try to push it, if there's no support coming from their own agency or from the body that they belong to, then their own reform agendas will be useless. So I can't say for sure that in terms of effectivity or not. But again, my call is that we need to give the president more room to breathe, as it is his first year. Maybe we can be a little more, we can look at him from a more critical perspective in the next years or so, but the first year really is a year of gaining ground for his administration.
No, I'm also from the government. I'll be very biased.
I think there has been a very good vetting process. So there were consultations made, and in terms of the economic managers, I think it's heavily vetted. So they consulted with the industry, with the academics. So in terms of the economic managers, I would say that it went through a very good screening process.
Hi, good morning. I'm AC Nichols from CNN Philippines. For Shanice, just a follow-up to your recommendation that there needs to be a stronger anti-corruption messaging. Would you say that the lack of messaging would perhaps send the wrong signal to public servants, especially the ones on the ground, and coming from President Duterte, who was very vocal about going after corrupt officials. And in fact, over the years, we see him firing people linked to corruption. Now, with President Marcos, would you say that, what is the impact on the ground when it comes to the lack of anti-corruption messaging?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting observation, because that's very forward-looking, right? And I can say definitely there is an impact. As we've seen, I've mentioned the Corruption Perceptions Index scores a while ago. There's a professor that I used to work with, that I continue to work with, and he has a theory on the bust and boom of corruption. Essentially, the political will of administrations is seen in their statements, in the way that they fund anti-corruption agencies, for instance. And we see that there's always a better, as we've seen in the trends above, there's always a better perception of corruption, especially coming into the midterm. But when we see that after the midterm, there are a lot of things that come up out of that government. The controversies start to come out, the scandals. And I personally believe that in order for the Marcos administration to sustain his popularity, and even the way that the efforts of transparency and accountability are going on, the way to sustain this is to craft a strong anti-corruption stance. It's really important that the president will be able to say that he himself is against corruption. He doesn't need to do what previous administrations did, like firing and all, but he just needs to be able to constantly express that anti-corruption is a necessity, or anti-corruption mechanisms, and that we value transparency, integrity, and accountability within his government. So, yeah.
Dr. Kiko?
What I notice about this president is he did not appoint, or he did not create this so-called presidential anti anti-corruption committee, which is usually done by a new president. I think that's good because you are relying on existing institutions. But having said that, there was no advocacy or promotion of putting in more budget for the Office of the Ombudsman. As we all know, the Office of the Ombudsman is highly under-resourced. And there is also a bill, I don't know if it has been refiled, an Ombudsman Strengthening Act, which would enable the Office of the Ombudsman to hire more lawyers, more personnel, and upgrade the salaries of the Ombudsman. At the same time, the Ombudsman, I don't know how many years are left in his term, but I think a signal would be the once the term of the current one is done, the appointment of a new ombudsman. And I think we have to watch out what the president would say in that regard. So it's something to watch out, I think. And the Office of the Ombudsman is very important, since it's the agency, independent agency for prosecuting corruption.
And we've been hearing, are you okay? All right. We've been hearing about political will, legislature, and also the different bills pending to ensure transparency and accountability in government, such as the FOI bill, the e-governance, and the budget modernization bills. Considering that politicians are the first ones, or one of the first ones to benefit from the lack of transparency, and you mentioned political will, do you see these measures actually surpassing this Congress, or in the next 2 to 3 years, perhaps, before we do have another election, considering that it is not really in their interest to ensure more transparency and accountability in government, just to be very straightforward about it?
Okay. As far as the PBBM is concerned, which also include provision, or rather one provision in that citizens' participation in one section. Yes, we're hopeful that this PBBM bill will be passed, given that we have already consulted a lot in Congress, and there are congressmen that are sponsoring this bill already. In the same manner, as far as the Senate is concerned, we have already identified and have responded to our proposal of this PBBM. So I think we're hopeful, but of course that all depends still as far the Congress is different from the executive.
How
So
about-
we're hopeful.
Yes, sir, just to add e-governance and budget modernization.
That is, the PBBM, the Budget
PBBM,
Modernization
okay.
Bill,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, I'd like to add on the FOI initiative. While we are waiting for the legislative department to act on that, the executive department is doing the capacity building. So that's why we have a certificate course on freedom of information officers. That's one. And when we talk about transparency and accountability, we have mechanisms in place. So there's no absence on that. Only maybe in some aspect, when it comes to messaging, there's somehow gaps on it. But if we look at our mechanisms, our policies, our laws, we have well-crafted policies. And the bills that are pending now in Congress are reiteration and a way of strengthening these laws within the context of the 21st century era, and also in line with PBBM's agenda in this administration. Thank you.
All right, we have another question.
Just to add
Okay,
that,
go
Joyce,
ahead, sir.
I have here the list. We have already 11 who authored of passing the bill in Congress, and we have 2 in the Senate, just to let the information. Thank you. I think that's for you.
Since Dr. Magno mentioned the ombudsman, I just wanted to ask. I don't know if you guys would wanna answer, pero try ko na lang rin. I just wanna know what your opinion is on the dismissal of Marcos ill-gotten wealth cases, because in recent years we're seeing that more and more ill-gotten wealth cases against the Marcos are being dismissed. And then now that he's president, there are talks that the PCGG might be abolished. What is your thoughts on that? Especially connecting it to the efforts of the government on anti-corruption.
I don't know if I can answer that because it's not within the purview of my topic. So maybe Shanice can answer.
Again, good question. um, Personally, that's the PCGG, and the issues on the ill-gotten wealth are not within. While I discuss anti-corruption, no, these are not within the scope of what I've looked at so far. It's hard to answer considering, Marcos isn't the only politician with existing, these questions that remain unanswered. There are other politicians as well who continue to be members of the government, and so it's not. I don't think it would be fair for me to assess or to give, yes, like a conclusive answer on what my opinion is regarding these dismissals of ill-gotten wealth. We're not dismissing, we're looking from many different angles, and I think that's the best way of going about it. It's not that I'm trying to be safe, but really it's not within the scope of what we've been looking at so far. And transparency and accountability, we're looking at this administration from this year, and maybe more, we can have a new discussion on that, but probably not within the scope of this current roundtable discussion.
All right. We have another one from the media.
Hi. Hello. Hi, I'm Iya Gozampo from Rappler. So, since President Marcos is wrapping up his first year in office, a lot of advocacy groups are releasing their own assessments for the president's first year. And the common denominator of these assessments is that the president has made a lot of good pronouncements, but no real changes have been felt in any way, that the president and his cabinet are actually playing it safe. What are your thoughts on this assessment that there are no changes yet felt in his first year?
Coming from the government, sir, what can you say that there are no changes felt yet? And why do you
Okay.
think the public feel
Okay.
this way, sir, that the changes haven't been felt?
Okay, let's say we know for a fact that this is the first year of the administration. So any reform, any programs and projects, or if you want to assess, there will no be basically an impact first. You cannot see the impact because we just only have this first year of the administration of the president. But the thing is, we have already moving, kumbaga sabi nga, malayo pa ang pupuntan, pero malayo na rin ang narating natin. So I think that's where I want to put that, doon ko ilalagay. Kasi we have already done a lot, but of course, malayo pa yung tatahakin natin. But yes, mayroon naman lang gagawa na as far as transparency, accountability, and of course, well, from our perspective, the citizens' participations, as mentioned, is really, kumbaga, as mentioned to you, we're institutionalizing already what has been being done in the past. So I guess that's what this government is doing right now as far as transparency and accountability. So institutionalize what has been done in the past. And one thing more, since this is a continuation, so you don't look or base on what is has been done in the by the previous administration to the next, but looking at what's the benefit of this program, what's the benefits of this reform is doing for the country.
When can we start reaping those benefits, sir? When can we start feeling the benefits?
Well, let's give this a chance. Kasi ang pagdidesign isang, for example, digitization, I think it will take you a long time to digitize a system. At least to 5 to 10 years for some governments or institution to develop their own digitization reforms. Okay, so it will really take time. But of course, even that digitization is still far-fetched to have it within this year. We are doing by piece. Like for example, we want to have that integrated financial management information system, but right now we have this budget and treasury management system that is supposed to be looking forward. That comes the development of that integrated. This BTMS will not come be interoperable to that whole of government financial management information system.
Yeah, I'd like to add on that, Asek Toledo. If you take a look at the different government agencies, we have more than 20. They are really working on it. Of course, outside the government, other stakeholders may not see those efforts that our government agencies, especially like for example, the lead agency taking the digitalization is the Department of Information Communication Technology. They're really working hard on it, and they've been connecting with the local level, with the government agencies. DILG is also working hard on that, DTI, DOST, and other government agencies. So they are collaborating, and they have this interagency working relationship wherein they will be able in the next few months or few years, I guess, to really implement in full the those things that are under the agenda or direction of President Marcos.
Nothing to add? Okay.
Really briefly, I mentioned a while ago, and this is coming from us. We are independently coming into this in contrast to our government officials here. But really, one thing I want to emphasize on is the political will. So, and this goes beyond the first year. So the we see political will over the years and not just this first year. That's one thing I want to emphasize. Maybe you can start looking at this from a different perspective in the next year or so if these promises are not kept. But so far, we've been seeing that there are actual gains that and we need to recognize that. It's easy to become critical of what we are seeing, especially maybe coming from civil society organizations who might not have felt the gains themselves. And that's understandable. As I mentioned, it is the first year.
Quickly. Yeah, government alone can't do it. So we need the cooperation of the private sector. We are seeing that it's very active, the CSOs and other stakeholders. So again, we have to develop the culture of patriotism and nationalism in helping the current administration in order for us to really realize that aspiration that we want for the Philippines.
Okay. And then lastly, sir? Yes?
May I just add, as far as digitalization is concerned, we just had a meeting with our development partner, which is the IMF, wherein they assess overall the digitization efforts, the reforms that we've been doing. And one thing that is very interesting is we have a lot of digitization efforts individually, as mentioned by Dean, that different departments, different agencies have their own digitization. But the thing is, they are not there's no operational, they're not talking to each other. So we want that interoperability of that particular systems to be developed. So that's one thing. But yes, we have this already, the decision effort as far as the government is concerned.
Okay. And on that note, we would like to thank our speakers again, ASEC Rolando Toledo, Dr. Kiko Magno, Dean Lizan Calina, and Ms. Shanice Espiritu. And thank you also to our guests here in the venue for joining us today. And I would also like to thank those who joined us online via Zoom and those who watched us on Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us today in our forum on the legitimacy of President Marcos Jr., entailing the need for more transparent and accountable governance. But before we go, we would like to invite you all to join us again in our next forum next month, July 28th, for our post-State of the Nation Address Forum. During that time, we will look into the priorities of the Marcos Jr. administration in the coming year or years. And also, this might be interesting, especially to our friends from the media, we will be releasing the results of the latest Pulse Asia survey on corruption. Hindi lang umabot this month. So we will have that next month. That's on July 28th. Once again, this has been Joyce Ilas, and thank you very much for joining us today, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you. For our speakers, let's have a photo op.